Hi everyone, good morning. It's great to be here. First time for me with this sort of silent disco setup, so bear with me, it's a bit strange. So today what I want to talk to you about is our experience in building an AI-assisted conversational platform, which we embedded across the buying journey at... no sound? Oh, so no sound. Ah, you need to put the headphones on. Sorry. So I will touch on just a brief intro on the company and the challenge that we're facing, and then we will spend some time on the solution, and hopefully what I really want to do today is to leave you with an idea on how to build a conversational platform for your marketing requirements. So just a couple of words about me. I come from B2C, companies like Vodafone and Acer, and then more recently I spent the last 6 years at JLL, which is a professional services firm specialized in real estate. So really sort of led this kind of sort of chatbot and conversational experiences in both B2C and B2B environment, although today we will specifically talk about our content marketing and B2B experience. So the problem we're facing at JLL was multifaceted. So first of all, JLL as a professional services company specialized in real estate is a truly large, diverse, multinational company. We have more than 70 websites across a number of languages. We also market to a very diverse audience, which is made of investors, so professionals who invest in real estate as an asset class, but we also sell to companies like the one you belong to that need to occupy real estate, whether or not they own the walls or not. And finally, we do research, we do brokerage services. So in other words, we have one brand that really covers from first-time buyers up to companies like BlackRock invest in real estate. Very complex and diverse audience. We also operate in a highly competitive industry where keywords are incredibly expensive to buy on search engine. And we, as I mentioned, because of the diversity of the audience, we have to orchestrate complex user journeys that usually tend to require several clicks. You know, we definitely are not like a click company where you land on the website, in a couple of clicks you find what you need. It's really a sort of a broad and deep navigation journey. So all of this obviously resulted in very low stickiness, low NPS, low satisfaction from our users, and high bounce rates. So obviously, we looked at other things like fixing the search engine on the website, optimizing our campaigns, but all of that was not enough. And so we looked at a solution that could bring to life a conversational experience on the website, an AI-powered conversational chatbot that would answer questions of the users in real time. The idea was to use both real-time user behavior as well as past user behavior to pop up this chatbot dynamically. So what we didn't want to do was to have like the sticky sticker on the bottom right corner that as soon as you land on a website, boom, you have like a pop-up that says, do you need help, do you want to talk to me? So the idea was to do it dynamically. We also wanted to fully integrate sales and marketing and services platforms, delivering very specific use cases. So not a catch-all, not a ChatGPT-like experience. We wanted to serve specific use cases, book time with an agent, find the content you're looking for, find the research paper you're looking for, or raise a ticket if it was a service query. And obviously we wanted this to integrate with marketing technology, to have a fully integrated experience with Salesforce and all the other tools we'll touch on later. So in terms of where we went through several steps. Obviously we started from a need assessment, understanding these specific use cases we wanted to cater for. We prepared the data, we'll come on data later on as well, but we prepared the data to sort of gather all our knowledge management and sales data repository in order to train this conversational chatbot with our own first-party data. We then developed conversational flows and scripts, because obviously you still want to guide the chatbot in the direction you want it to go, especially from a tone of voice perspective and from an interaction perspective. Then, as I said, we integrated it with Salesforce and our knowledge management platform, which is, in our case, is Microsoft SharePoint. And finally, we launched a pilot, starting very small in the UK and France first. I will just fly on the results, very positive. I mean, you increased on the conversion rate quite significantly, reduced the bounce rate, and increased time spent on page, which essentially meant that customers were finding the content more relevant to the journey and were staying around longer than they used to in the past. So this is really the core I want to talk to you about today, and that is how we did it. And I think I will sort of drive through also our decision-making process. So when you start looking at the conversational AI technology, you essentially have three choices. One is to go with a commercial model, which is very expensive, but it's immediately available. So you can go with the IBM Watson or Google Dialogflow, and you can just buy this technology, fine-tune it with your data, you license it, and you're ready to go fairly quickly. The other option is to go open source with an open source technology that is already sort of semi-available, and you will spend a little bit more time fine-tuning it. And finally, you can just build your own model in-house, which is probably the most expensive and crazy option of all, because you actually also have to train the model from scratch, not just fine-tune it. So what we did was we went for the open source approach. We specifically chose Rasa because Rasa has the interesting option to be open source, but also has an option to go pro. So you can then switch to the commercial model and license the more advanced model and get all the support from them. But we decided to start open source. So we fed the model our own first-party data and trained it. And we did also rigorous testing, not just within my team in marketing technology, but we also invited the service team, the business teams, select users to really factor in all the feedback coming from the audience that was going to use the technology once live. We then obviously looked at integrations. This tool could not deliver the experience it is delivering to customer if it wasn't so deeply embedded with our channels and with our data. So the way, like very broadly speaking, the way the architecture looks like is that we have the core of conversational technology at the center that then delivers these experiences through essentially three channels. Adobe Experience Cloud, which means JLL.com, so our website. Then we have WhatsApp, which is especially for service, I would say exclusively for service. You can interact with JLL through WhatsApp if you have an issue, because we also do facility management. So if you have an issue in your building, you can interact with through WhatsApp. And then we also have our own custom apps, because especially for property management and facility management, we have our own legacy apps, on-premise applications, very old real estate stuff that is still integrated. So as a facility manager, if a lift is broken, you can still use the portal you're used to raise a ticket, but instead of going through all the modules, you can actually raise the ticket using the conversational experience. And then on the data side, the integration lies with Salesforce mainly for CRM, sales and marketing. So we know who the user is. We know, for instance, which question the user has asked to the conversational chatbot, and we can pass them on to the salespeople when the user decides to book an appointment. But we also integrated with Salesforce. So back to the use case around service, all the knowledge base around service and again, how to manage a ticket on lifts is embedded into the model itself. That the user utilizes. We also looked very, very carefully at data. I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges, especially for a large brand with lots of potential risks in terms of brand reputation. We looked at ethical data sourcing, and we looked essentially, when looking at data, at what are calling the industry the sort of the 5 Ps of ethical sourcing. So the first one, we only fed the model data which we had 100% verified in terms of provenance. As you might imagine, we have multiple data sources at JLL. We have our own first-party data. We buy data from providers like ZoomInfo. We acquire data offline at events like this one by collecting business cards. All of this data obviously has different GDPR sort of allowances and things we can do with it and things that we cannot do with it. So we only fed to the model in terms of fine-tuning data that we could trace and audit where the data came from in the first place. We also wanted to make sure that the data had the right purpose. So for instance, we took more liberties when using data for the service use case, because in the service field you can actually do much more with data than you can when you are building a sales or marketing use case. So sales and marketing, you need opt-in consent. Although we are a B2B company, we decided to go with full opt-in consent, so we're not reaching out to customers, and we're not using customer data unless they really have given us opt-in consent for sales and marketing reasons. But we can actually be much broader in how we can use data when we talk about service use cases, because we don't have many of the limitations. We obviously put in place protection measures. In this case, we built the platform on our Azure private cloud, so the environment was segregated, was secure. We are not sharing this data with any of the models, because the beauty of taking an open source model is that you take it, then you install it on your private cloud, and it's completely segregated from anyone else. So when you fine-tune the model, you're doing it in your own private controlled environment. I touched already on privacy. Privacy was maintained also after the model was live. So once you talk with a conversational chatbot, you're actually feeding us data, and this data again goes in this segregated private environment. It's not shared across the organization. And finally, we prepared the data, so we really cleansed and structured the data in a way that could be used by the fine-tuning team. The reason for that is because, as you can imagine, the data was really heterogeneous in its source. We had data coming from PDF files, knowledge management, we have data coming from Excel files, we have structured data coming from Salesforce, so we really had to find a way to really structure and clean the data and only feed high quality data. I think you always hear if you put low quality data you will get a low quality output, but I think when you work with conversational models this is even more so the case. If you really input bad data in the fine-tuning phase, you will not get the high quality results you're looking for. So in terms of what we learned, I think one key learning, which is not, I would say, unique to conversational AI, I think it's for any transformation initiative, is to really start small. So in our case, for instance, we decided not to start from the US, which is our largest market, but the US contributes to more than 65% of our global revenues and more than 17% of our global profits. So the obvious choice would have been, let's just go with the US, but we said no. Let's start with a smaller use case where there is less complexity, also less political friction internally, less resistance. So we started with a very specific geographical focus. It was the UK first and then France. And also in terms of use case, instead of trying to boil down the ocean, we started with a specific use case around content marketing. We didn't do sales, we didn't do service, we started with content marketing. And the reason for that is because it was a small enough use case that we could entirely play in-house within the marketing team. We didn't need to collaborate with many other departments, but it was a big problem. I mean, internally in the organization, people felt that we were just having too much content on the website and users were not finding it. So in other words, we found a problem that was, in our view, small enough to be solved with the pilot, but big enough for the bigger business to care. So if we actually solved it with this pilot, the business would actually say, hey, this is actually working, so let's expand it in other areas. So following this logic, we defined a very clear use case, avoiding the temptation, because this conversation, especially when you buy or license or acquire an open source model, you quickly find out they can answer pretty much every question. So the temptation is to just go very broad with the use cases, whereas no, we resisted that temptation. We went very narrow and fine-tuned only for a very specific use case. And we designed it also with our tone of voice in mind. This is another super important element, I think, when embedding conversational chatbots, that they need to speak the language of the brand. We spent literally millions of dollars in 2022 completely refreshing and refactoring our overarching brand. We relaunched the brand in November 2022. That effort cost a lot of money. You cannot just have it go to waste by then having users chat to a chatbot that feels unnatural and rigid, which was our previous chatbot experience. We used to have a very old-fashioned and rigid tree-based chatbot architecture, and that is completely not what you want to do when you're spending so much money on brand. So fine-tuning was not just about the quality of the results, but it was also teaching the model how we want it to interact depending on the different audiences. You want to be friendly with, I don't know, journalists or media and in general people accessing content marketing, but you need to be very formal and careful when you're talking with people working at financial institutions like fund managers. So really teaching the model that sort of different feeling and how the tone of voice had to adapt was very important. Finally, we tested and trained the model to make sure, as I mentioned earlier, that it really captured the essence of our services, our products, and in terms of the service use cases, the problems and issues we were solving. This phase was very important because we actually involved the people outside of marketing technology. So we did obviously a first test ourselves, but then the batch of the fine-tuning was actually done by leveraging a distributed team of what we call digital champions, that are business people, service people, that have been identified for being digitally savvy. We onboarded them in the UAT and fine-tuning process, so they could add obviously their knowledge, which is far more than what we can have in marketing, and especially marketing technology. So it was really a collaborative process of fine-tuning. And finally, we measured. We measured before the quality, but also after launching, and to this date, we're still measuring how the conversational chat is performing in terms of human feedback, but also in terms of how many inquiries are we generating on Salesforce, how quick is the pipeline moving, what is the increase in sales conversion. All of that is measured on a monthly basis and shared with the sales team so we can adapt and fine-tune the model in real time. So I tried to keep it condensed and short because I wanted to give you some time to ask any questions if you have any. Yeah? Sorry. Yeah. So the question for those of you who weren't able to listen was about how did we fine-tune the model, and more importantly, how did it take to fine-tune the model? So it really depended on the use case. So for the first use case, that was content marketing, it was a fair, I would say, relatively quick process. In around 3 months, we had an MVP we could then share with the broader marketing team, and then 2 months later we were live. So I would say end-to-end 5 months we were ready to go live in production. The reason why I say it's easier is because most of this content marketing is natural language anyway. So these are like, white papers, content marketing assets. So it's about real estate. Yes, it's about a specific domain, but the language is fairly common. Whereas when we started moving into the service use case, and that was a very complicated area because it has incredibly specific procedures and highly technical documents. The process is still ongoing, to be honest. So we managed to go live with some specific service use cases, like mostly about broken things in buildings, because that anyway require an immediate human intervention. But for more sophisticated use cases, we're still training the model, and I think end-to-end will probably take at least 9 to 10 months to really, in an ideal world, if we were to cover all use cases, it's probably going to be a 9 to 10 months process, just because of the specificity and complexity of the use case. Yes? Oh, no, we have a microphone now. Cheers. Thank you.
I was going to ask a question about the decision making between a proprietary tool and an open source tool, and whether you have not regretted that choice, but whether there are some advantages to the commercial model that you might see now, having gone through the open source process.
Yeah, well, I think that is a very good question. So we try to play it safe by choosing a model that gave us the option to go pro. So we haven't regretted yet, in the sense that we're still happy with open source, but we know that we have that safety net with pro. I think the biggest challenge with open source is that it's very hard to keep costs under control, because obviously the more you fine-tune the model, the more you're consuming this GPU, CPU power, and obviously the costs, sometimes when I logged into the Azure platform, I see sometimes the costs when we just run a test and we spend like $2,000, $3,000 just in an afternoon to run one test. So the biggest, I would say, wouldn't say regret, but definitely something that you need to keep into consideration is that when you have your own model in your own instance, everything you do on it is going to cost you money, and it's very hard to predict how much money is going to cost you. So that's the challenge. I think if we look at the future, I tend to agree with in the sense what you were implying, that probably for many use cases, working with someone like Salesforce, for instance, and just using their model and spending credits on their platform is going to be more efficient, because you get cutting edge technology, but you keep all the costs under control because you know how many credits you're spending. You can really ring fence all your budget. Whereas with the in-house model, you build in-house competence, you keep teams happy, you motivate talent. So it's a great experiment you're building with the team. But I think long term, there is a risk that the cost will just balloon, yes.
Hello?
Hi.
You got me? Okay. Because this is obviously really cutting edge technology, and it's, you said I think about 10 to 12 months to get it all tested and done, a lot of money invested. Did you get much resistance from other areas of the company when this was being planned and proposed, from people that maybe didn't quite understand the technology and the benefits in the long term? And if you did, how did you sort of overcome those?
Yeah, good point. This is actually the reason why we started with content marketing, because to be honest with you, many people in the business actually hated the website. They found the experience horrible, and there was this strong pain in the business. They were saying like, customers are not finding what they want. So what we decided to do was to run a use case that was internally marketing, and everybody in marketing agreed we had to do something to fix content marketing. So the answer is no, we didn't find a lot of resistance because we were solving for something that was felt as a big pain point. But we are still finding a lot of resistance now that we're expanding, for instance, into service, which is, I said, the fine-tuning is still in motion. And the reason for that is because there is a lot of resistance. The service teams do not believe that this is going to be delivering the right level of customer experience, for instance. There are lots of concerns about specific use cases and how these are going to be managed. There are concerns about maybe even increasing the number of tickets, because you make it easier for users to raise tickets. So very often in facility management, for instance, people don't raise tickets just because it's quite a pain to go through the process. So unless it's really a big problem, like a lift not working, people will not necessarily mention if there is dust on the floor. Whereas if you give them access to a conversational chatbot, the risk is that people will just, at least this is what the business tells us, that they will just increase the number of tickets. So there is a lot of resistance in certain areas of the business. And the way we are trying to address it is again by moving slowly. We are also in an industry that is not necessarily super adapt to change. So we try to find those smaller use cases. As I mentioned earlier, in services about the big ticket items, like things that are broken, that needs fixing, and needs anyway an escalation to a human. So we're not tailored to the service people, the AI will fix the problem for you. We're simply saying we're building a better experience for the user to raise a ticket that you will solve the way you always solved it, with a human interaction. But I think as you start to expand in the company, yes, there is a risk that more reticence will be found. But hopefully we are building a platform of goodwill, because people like what they see on the website today. They like how we're generating leads. The customers tell us, we run feedback loops with Medallia, and we have verbatim of customers saying, wow, I was not expecting this. So hopefully this will generate some positive goodwill that we can then spend internally to push the more difficult use cases. Hold on. Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I hope you have a very nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.